Hello there, everyone. Luciano Oliveira, Oliveira Lawyers. Today's Sunday, March the 3rd, 3:30 p.m. Rio de Janeiro time, and we are starting one more live stream. As usual, for all of you who are participating live, you have a priority in terms of picking a topic of your interest to be discussed here with the large community of expats and foreign citizens interested in Brazil. Let's take a look. Let's see if there are any questions so far here in the chat. Keith, well. All right, welcome, Keith. Keith is participating in our live streams. He always brings some interesting questions. Boa tarde dos Estados Unidos. Is the retirement visa also a good path towards citizenship? Obrigado. That's a good question, Keith. So the retirement visa is a visa that was created a few years ago by the President Bolsonaro administration, and this visa is intended for people who want to stay for long term in Brazil. At the inception, the idea was for the applicant to get a couple of years of renewable indefinitely, meaning you could keep renewing for as long as you wanted. And now there is an ongoing discussion about the possibility of migrating or upgrading the retirement visa to a permanent residency in Brazil, which in turn would give you access to the citizenship. Okay, but we have changes in the immigration framework as we speak by the new administration, and we cannot tell, Keith, for sure if the retirement visa is going to allow applicants to upgrade the retirement visa to a permanent residency, and then through the permanent residency to apply for citizenship. Okay, there are a couple of main immigration laws, and there are different interpretations, and we do not know which one the new administration is gonna pick. But as of now, our recommendations or our advisory to our clients is that the retirement visa, at least at inception, it was not designed as a route to citizenship. Okay, it is possible that this is going to be changed by the new administration, but we don't know yet. I think we're going to have an answer in a few months from now, because we do have some applications that we're going to try, or we're going to try for a couple of clients to upgrade from a retirement visa to a permanent residency. And if you achieve the permanent residency, yes, you have a path towards citizenship. Okay, Keith, so stay tuned. We don't have an answer today, but I'm confident we're going to have an answer by July, because we do have a couple of applications that we are going to try to upgrade from the retirement visa to a permanent residency in Brazil. Okay, let's take a look here at the other entries in our chat. Baron Jackson, when transferring funds to purchase a property, how can it be timed so that the transfer of funds is at the same time when the seller signs at the notary? That's an interesting question, Baron, and just providing some additional information for the participants. So one of the challenges of purchasing real estate in Brazil is transferring funds for the transaction, because most foreign citizens, they do not have the capability of opening a bank account in Brazil. and therefore they need to transfer the funds from abroad directly into the seller's bank account. But then the challenge is going to be how to time the release of funds to the closing, because you don't want to pay the seller upfront, of course. Unfortunately, in Brazil, there is no escrow account, and there is no way for you to send the monies and to have this money sitting and to be released at closing upon signature of the deed of sale. So there is no such a thing as an escrow. So what we do here at the firm, we work with a currency exchange bank, and the currency exchange bank is going to park the money. So you still send the money directly. Now, this is the answer, Baron. That's how we do with our clients. We use a currency exchange bank in Brazil as an intermediary. You are still sending the money to the seller. So you're not sending the money to us. You're not sending the money to the currency exchange bank itself. You're still sending the money to the seller, but the money is going to be rerouted through a currency exchange bank. And the currency exchange bank is going to park the money, and the currency exchange bank is going to release the money on the day of the closing, okay? For some higher amounts, we can even tell the currency exchange bank to wait for our green light before releasing the money. But that's not really easy to do it. Like you do need a relationship with a bank, because as you may imagine, like, bank personnel are not sitting around waiting for your call to release money. So in our case, because we have like a decades-long relationship with the bank, we're going to be able to do so. And as I imagine that your next question is going to be, all right, how do I find the currency exchange banks? So I'm gonna share here in our chat window a list of every single Brazilian financial institution authorized to handle currency exchange in Brazil. All right, just entered to the chat window. I'm not sure if you guys can see the chat window. I know that YouTube kind of processes the video and the chat communication, but usually a day later, you're going to be able to see the entire live stream plus all the chat communication. So I did share a link to the Brazilian Central Bank in which they disclose 176 financial institutions capable of releasing currency in Brazil, okay? It's pretty important that when working with these institutions, you pick a bank. In our firm, we do not work with anything else other than a bank, because you're going to see that there are currency exchange brokers. And what I don't like in terms of working with a currency exchange broker is because they can go out of business real quick, which is not the case for a bank. So a bank, as you may imagine, banks are highly regulated in Brazil. And honestly, like, I think it's easier for a bank to go under in the United States than it is in Brazil. So, like, every now and then you see banks, like, I think the one of the last ones was a bank in the Silicon Valley that went under, right, with, billions of dollars invested, but the bank was still, like, going bankrupt. And then, like usual, just like usual, other banks, they stepped in and they kind of bought the accounts from this bank. But the point is, like, in Brazil, banks are highly regulated. So here, we're not going to work with brokers. We're going to work with banks only, okay? But there you go. You have the link. And if you work with a currency exchange bank, again, that's our answer to Baron Jackson. You could, in theory, time the release of the money with the closing signature. Okay, Baron? I hope that was helpful. Rossi Rico. Welcome, Rossi Rico. Is a temporary visa the same as a temporary residency? Are both subject to the 183-day rule? All right. So the distinction, Rossi, is that visas, they are usually issued abroad. You cannot have a visa issued while in Brazil. So when you go to a Brazilian consulate or a Brazilian embassy, they are going to issue a visa. And on the other hand, consulates and embassies, they cannot issue the residency. So it's a very silly distinction, right? Visas are issued abroad, and residencies, they are issued in Brazil. So when you say, or when we say that you can get like the digital nomad visa while in Brazil, we are trying to simplify the language, because in reality, or from a technical perspective, you're not going to get a digital nomad visa in Brazil. You're going to get a digital nomad visa or digital nomad residency in Brazil. That's the main distinction. And the 183-day rule, usually both are going to have the same one when they are issued for visitors, for tourists, right? So if you are visiting Brazil for tourism, for visiting, if you get a visa through a consulate or an embassy, or if you do the e-visa, the new e-visa, you're going to actually have the 90 days. You're going to have 90 days to stay in Brazil. If you are arriving in Brazil until April the 10th and you are a U.S. citizen, you don't need a visa. So you're going to get into Brazil under a visa waiver. So you're not getting a visa, you're not getting a residency, you are getting a permit or an allowance to stay in Brazil for 90 days. And it's not 180 days, and it's not 183 days. Now, because you're saying 183-day rule, I'm assuming you're talking about the tax trigger that when you stay in Brazil longer than 183 days, you become a tax resident, right? And just to give you, Rossi, an example that is going to clear up any questions you have about the status that you need to have to, fall under the 183-day, you don't need any status at all. So let's say if someone enters Brazil illegally, right? Illegally, so undocumented, right? Like that's the new term, like the politically correct term, the undocumented immigrants in Brazil. If you are 184 days in Brazil, you are a tax resident. Okay, so it does not matter if you got a visa abroad or if you got a residency. Once you cross the 183 days in Brazil, you are a tax resident. J Quest, boa tarde, J Quest, welcome. Why is Brazil one of the most difficult countries to get citizenship in Latin America? I want to invest in real estate, but find the requirements too much since I travel as part of my work. Yes, that's an interesting question, JQuest. There are probably multiple answers or multiple perspectives to why Brazil represents, or it is a difficult country for you to get a citizenship. The number one, in my opinion, is going to be bureaucracy and red tape, because Brazil is highly attached to bureaucracy. Like this comes since from the beginning of our country, which was colonized by Portugal, and Portugal is the same thing, is king in terms of bureaucracy and red tape. And because of that, when people are trying to, obtain a residency and citizenship, you're going to need to go through a huge number of requirements and documents that you're going to need to provide. So I think that's the first part of the answer. Another perspective is that Brazil doesn't need to work hard to have people visiting. Okay, so I get this question every now and then. Why? Could you compare, Brazil to Argentina, to Costa Rica, to Paraguay, or to Uruguay, or Chile? And my answer is gonna be usually, listen, you don't compare, right? Like, I mean, it doesn't make sense for you to compare a country with continental dimensions with another country that is producing like the GDP for other countries. They are not going to be equivalent to the São Paulo's GDP, right? So it's the same thing of comparing the United States to Portugal, right? Or United States to, I don't know, like Poland. It does not make sense to compare. So Brazil, from this perspective, sees itself as a very unique country in which people are going to need to follow whatever needs to be followed to achieve citizenship, okay? Now, I'm not saying I agree. I'm not saying it should be difficult just because Brazil is an amazing country. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just giving you a perspective that I believe permeates the Brazilian immigration framework and mindset when it comes to set up the rules for people to obtain residency and citizenship. Okay, I hope that helps, JQuest. WS, tudo bem, Luciano? Bill, welcome, Bill. Always excited to see Bill here among us. Bill has a history of participating in our live streams and more, right, Bill? Thank you for coming back. All right, Rocky Life. Can you ask for political asylum in Brazil if you don't have any documents to prove your origin of country you came from? Rocky, you do need some level of documents, okay? So we do not specialize in humanitarian types of visas, but I do know that for countries in which there is war or some type of unrest, social unrest, and something that's going on. Usually, Brazil is going to be pretty flexible in terms of accepting alternative paperwork. So, if you are applying for residency coming from the United States or most of Europe, you're going to need to follow a very strict list of documents to be provided. However, if you're coming from Venezuela, for instance, which is one of the countries for which Brazil has a specific a set of rules, you're going to be able to apply with pretty much anything that you have, okay? But this anything is not going to be just your word. I mean, there is still a need for some level of certainty by the Brazilian government that you are indeed a citizen from Venezuela, right? So, for instance, if you present a national ID card from Venezuela, you're going to be good. If you present a valid, original, authenticated birth certificate from Venezuela, you're going to be good. If you present a passport from Venezuela, you're going to be good, right? Now, if you just come and you say, well, I'm from Venezuela and I don't have any piece of papers to prove that I'm from Venezuela, you're going to have a hard time, okay? So they make it easy, but you still need to provide, you still have this burden of proving that you are from Venezuela. And that's going to apply for other countries. One country that does not have any special route as we speak, which is kind of surprising, is like the Palestine. We don't have any special track for the Palestine. But we do have clients from the Palestine, and for them, what we're saying is like, try to follow as much as possible, the list of requirements for you to acquire a residency, and whatever you cannot provide, then we're going to provide to the Brazilian immigration a legal opinion that you are unable to provide such document, and therefore you should still be able to get the benefit that you are asking. Now, it's never guaranteed, but again, Brazil has this tradition providing a residency for humanitarian purposes. Okay, Rocky Life. So if you don't have any documents, you're going to be in trouble. If you have some documents, yes, there is a very good chance you could get a residency in Brazil. Daniel, welcome, Daniel. Good afternoon, Luciano. I have a few questions. I recently got approved for the digital nomad visa, and I'll be moving to Brazil at the end of this month. I am an American and plan on getting married with my Brazilian girlfriend in early 2025. Before my visa expires, should I try to get my RNE before getting married or after? I'm taking copies and have apostilled documents. Okay, so to get the RNE, you do need, Daniel, some type of immigration benefit in Brazil. Just to be a visitor, it does not entitle you to get the RNE. So some of our clients, so they don't need to rush into something as serious as marriage, they are going to apply for the digital nomad visa, right? And that's exactly the route that you followed, okay? So if you have the digital nomad visa approved abroad, yes, the first thing you should do is to get your RNE, right? Nowadays it's RNEMA. It just changes. E stands for foreign citizen, and EMA stands for migrant. Okay, so it was just a letter that changed. So it's no longer RNE. Today is RNEMA, but it's the exact same thing. And if you got the digital nomad visa, there is nothing precluding you from going to the Polícia Federal and getting the RNM card, which is going to make your marriage a little bit easier, okay? Unfortunately, it's not a lot easier. You're still going to need to provide a bunch of documents, okay? For U.S. citizens, for instance, you're going to need and I believe you have already, but the apostilled birth certificate, you're going to need a letter from the U.S. consulate issued in one of the several consulates across Brazil, stating that you're single. It's going to be a self-declaration that you're going to need to sign at the consulate, and they're going to have a consul attesting to your self-declaration. Some other registries, they are going to ask for an additional document from the Brazilian government that they don't have any information about a prior marriage that you had in Brazil. But that's usually, like a laundry list of requirements for you to meet before you are able to marry in Brazil. Just as a curiosity, we had a couple of U.S. clients who gave up in the middle of the process because of the brutal number of documents and steps that they had to complete, and they ended up marrying, if I'm not mistaken, I think I'm not sure if it is in Utah. Okay, I'm not sure if it is in Utah, but it looks like in Utah they are making super easy for people to marry remotely, probably over Zoom, right? So the U.S. citizen is going to be, for instance, in Brazil with the Brazilian with the U.S. citizen's fiancé, and they are going to marry in the U.S. from Brazil, right? That's mind-blowing, but it does explain, for those of you who do not understand the level of red tape and bureaucracy that we have in Brazil, just think about, like a U.S. citizen and a Brazilian citizen in Brazil marrying over video conference in Utah because they cannot get to the point in which their documents are enough for them to marry in Brazil. But there you go, Daniel. If you hit this wall, try Utah. And if it's not Utah, let me know, and then I'm going to get you the name of the state in which people are using for marriages, particularly when the Brazilian fiancé cannot fly into the US to marry in person. All right, Baron Jackson, thanks for the response. Also, you like to mention how setting up a business in Brazil could be troublesome. I think watching a Celso Russomano video would confirm how that's correct. That's funny. That's funny, Baron. So Celso Russomano, for those who do not know, Celso Russomano, he had a number of positions with the government. I'm not sure if maybe the latest one. He's a congressman. I don't really follow, but I did see many videos from Celso Russomano. Again, probably a Brazilian congressman, but he made a name. He made a name for himself by chasing businesses and people who were in trouble, like with the law, with the consumer code, and companies. So it's a pretty good example of how to run a business in Brazil. It's tough, and he looks at both sides, right? Like sometimes he's like trying to not exactly represent, but he's bringing a case like to a TV show, showing how smaller businesses are being hurt by larger businesses, or sometimes he's representing the consumers. But it's, like the show itself is very intense, and you see people running around, like the business is scrambling to try to address whatever he's like he's trying to uncover, but the intensity and like the broad range of issues addressed in Celso Russomano's shows, I think it does represent the challenges of running a business in Brazil, Baron. So thank you for sharing such interesting note about Celso Russomano. All right, Daniel, before my visa expires, should I try to get my RNE before getting married or after? I'm taking copies and have apostilled documents. Yes. Daniel, again, unfortunately, if you are in Brazil already, it may be too late, but there are other documents you would need. The main one is always like the apostilled birth certificate, but think about Utah. Okay, think about Utah. We do have a couple of example or sample lists of documents required for marriage. If you set up a consultation, we can go over the requirements for São Paulo state and Rio de Janeiro state, which are the two states in Brazil in which we have physical offices. So we do have sample lists of requirements, and then you would be able to decide if you still want to proceed with marriage in Brazil or maybe doing like through a video conference in Utah. Bill, I apologize. Bill, paying attention as usual. Were you going to have a guest speaker today? Yes. So, yes, James Weldon is our friend running Nomads Without Frontiers, and he could not attend today. The thing with James is that he's running his business, and his business is basically like, teaching foreign citizens on the fly about Brazil. And so he does that, traveling throughout Brazil with, groups of foreign citizens, most of them from the U.S. So to get James to participate on a Sunday is being difficult. We're gonna probably consider if we could do that on a Wednesday. But as you probably imagine, like Sundays are the best days for us to have such interviews. So I'm gonna try for March the 10th. If I'm still unable to get James Weldon to join us, then I'm gonna, have a Wednesday as a second, as a backup plan. Okay, Bill. But thank you for following up, yes, the idea was for us to have James Weldon today, but he could not participate today. Still pushing for next Sunday, March the 10th. JQuest, thank you. I saw in a video that couples can get citizenship by giving birth to a child in Brazil. Do we have to be in Brazil for an amount of time before giving birth? What's the process? No, there is 0 days that you need to be in Brazil, and the process is pretty straightforward. So after the child is born in Brazil, the child is going to get a Brazilian birth certificate, which is going to be the proof of citizenship. Different people, they're going to say, well, what about the passport? Isn't the passport the proof of nationality? Not in Brazil. In Brazil, Brazilian citizenship is proved by birth certificates. So once the child is born, the child is going to get the birth certificate. Then we're going to gather a bunch of other documents, and we're going to file on your behalf for either one of the parents, right, considering that one could be Brazilian and the other not. But we have a couple of clients from Europe, as you speak, that they are both from Europe. The wife gave birth to a child in Brazil, and we are applying for the residency for both of them, right? So you don't apply for citizenship right off the bat, JQuest. You apply actually for residency, and then after they achieve the residency, they need to be in Brazil for a year. Okay, it should be an uninterrupted 1 year, and then they can apply for citizenship. But first you apply for residency, and 1 year down the road you can apply for citizenship. But that's a very interesting process. We are handling, I think that's okay to say, I'm not saying the client's name, it's actually a couple from the Palestine. Okay, so not exactly Europe, right? Like, I mean, the Middle East, they're coming from the Palestine. They just had a child, and we're very happy because it is a healthy child, and we are applying on behalf of the couple, and along with the couple, they do have a couple of children. We are also applying for the children. The children comes with an additional perk. Once the children achieve permanent residency, which we're going to apply right off the bat, as soon as they get the permanent residency, they can apply for provisory citizenship. So for children up to 10 years old, they don't need to wait for a full year to apply for citizenship. They could get citizenship, although like what's called like the provisory citizenship immediately after obtaining the residency in Brazil. Okay, JQuest, so that's a great route. We do have cases here at the firm. Donna, welcome back. Good day. Once I gather all the necessary documents, will Brazil keep them or will they be returned to me at the conclusion of everything? So Donna, if I'm not mistaken, you are considering an application for the retirement visa, but this is going to apply for most of the applications. Usually, Brazil is not going to keep the documents. Brazil is going to return the documents, and at least for the application stage, when we are applying for our clients, every single document that we deliver to the Brazilian immigration is going to be like a digital scanned copy. We use like the so-called Migrante Web, which is like the immigration system that connects our firm to the Brazilian government. So everything is sent like remotely through scanned documents, okay? And then through the same platform, we interact with the Brazilian immigration analysts, like we exchange information, we answer questions. Of course, everything is under a proper document, a power of attorney that's going to show that our firm is representing the clients. But pretty much everything is done remotely and through digital scanned versions of your documents. However, when it's time for you to register at the Brazilian Federal Police, for you to get the RNM card upon registration, at that time they're going to want to see documents physically. And the usual documents that they want to see physically are going to be, of course, the passport. They want to see your original birth certificate. Okay, that's unusual for most foreign citizens, but Brazil is extremely attached to birth certificates. So if you show up with a photocopy, even with a good stamp, like saying, all right, this works as an original or this was an authenticated copy, you are out of luck. The Brazilian immigration will want to see your original birth certificate. Now, by original, I don't mean the same birth certificate that was issued a while ago when you were born, right? Like I'm talking about a birth certificate that was issued by the authority in charge of birth records in your country or state. In many European countries, usually this is going to be handled by a national authority. In the United States, it's by the state, right? So if someone is born in California, the birth certificate is going to be issued by the Health Department of California, and so on. And this is what I mean by original birth certificate. Again, not the same one that was issued decades ago. I'm just saying one that was issued by the authority in charge of your records. And this document, you got to show physically. You got to be, like the original one. And you got to have the apostille. If there is no apostille, they're going to say you're not going to be able to register. And then you're going to need to scramble to go after, the apostille. Otherwise, if you miss the time window to register, in theory, the Brazilian immigration could void either your visa if it was issued abroad, or your residency if you was allowed in Brazil under an application through our firm. Okay, Donna? But they are going to usually return the documents, and you're going to actually be showing at your registration. You're not going to be shipping these documents anywhere. You're going to be taking these documents to the interview/registration with you. I hope this helps, Donna. German, afternoon, my friend, and chat room friends. Welcome, German. Daniel, thank you so much for the response. Thank you, Daniel, for participating. As usual, you are welcome to come here as many times as you want and need. WS, meaning Bill. Cool, thank you, Bill. All right, Bill. I want you to see James Weldon's interview. I'm sure it's going to be exciting. Thank you for reminding us. Baron Jackson, when a foreign parent gives birth to a child in Brazil, what documents are required for the parents to apply for residency based off the birth of the child? Baron, documents may vary depending on the application, on where the parents come from. But I'm gonna tell you the three main ones. Okay, three main ones, because you're saying foreign parents, so I'm assuming the couple is from abroad and not just one of the two parents. So I'm gonna talk about the three main ones, right? But I'm not gonna be talking about every single one, because they could change according to the case. But the three main ones are going to be the birth certificate. Again, it needs an apostille. You're going to need a marriage certificate. And the pain in the neck is that the marriage certificate is going to need to be authenticated as well. So if you are married abroad, you need the apostille. Okay, and there may be a need for an additional registration of the marriage in Brazil which requires some understanding of the registrations. But that's something we handle here at the firm. And then a third requirement is going to be your criminal records, or the criminal records for each of the parents abroad. The Brazilian government, when you're applying for permanent residency because of childbirth, they're going to be very picky on the criminal records. So, for instance, if you're from the United States, they want to see records from the FBI, and I believe from the last 10 years. If you are in a different country, it gotta be nationwide records. It must come with an apostille. That's the same thing for the U.S. and most countries. In some countries, for instance, the United Arab Emirates, they are not a member of the Apostille Convention. So if you're coming from the UAE, you're going to need to run your documents by the Brazilian embassy in Abu Dhabi, okay? So that's why I say usually it depends. It's on a case-by-case basis. But a short answer for your question, Baron: birth certificate, marriage certificate, and criminal records with all the authentication required steps. All right, Kitwell, for the retirement visa, do you need an apostilled marriage certificate even if you are the only one in the marriage applying for the visa? If divorced, do you need both apostilled marriage and divorce certificates? Kit, not really. If you are applying for the retirement visa, the birth certificate should be enough. The whole point for the birth certificate is for the Brazilian government to know your parents' names, okay? From an ID perspective, Brazil does not believe that a person could be identified unless we know this person's parents' names, okay? So this entire attachment of Brazilian authorities to a birth certificate is to be able to tell who the parents are, all right? So in reality, like if you come from a country in which passports are gonna bring the parents' names on it, in theory, you wouldn't even need to present a birth certificate. On the other hand, in our experience, most countries, they do not include the parents' names on the passport, and therefore the birth certificate requirement we present almost like a staple, almost like a requirement across the board, because in our experience, applicants with a passport bringing parents' names, it's a big exception. All right, so no need for marriage certificate, no need for divorce certificate. Kit, on the other side, if you're gonna be buying real estate property in Brazil, guess what? Yes, you're gonna need to present a marriage certificate if you're married. And if you are married but you was divorced before, you're gonna need to present paperwork for both the marriage and the prior divorce as well. And the reason for that is because Brazil, whenever there are real estate rights, which is something important, and not only in Brazil but elsewhere, they want to make sure they understand who the potential owners are going to be for this property. So if you are married, guess what? Your spouse is going to end up showing up on the deed or the final title. And if you're divorced, the Brazilian authority wants to make sure that the divorce was finalized before you can buy a property as a divorcee. So that's the reasoning for you to have a marriage certificate or a divorce certificate. But again, not if you're just concerned with the retirement visa, they're not necessary. However, if you're going to be eventually buying properties, you may very well handle those documents so you don't need to go back to the U.S. later on when buying a property. I hope that makes sense. Okay, J-Quest, as Americans giving birth in Brazil, will the child be able to travel to the U.S. immediately, or is there a process to get the child dual citizenship? Yes, we saw the question or the issue happening in the past, J-Quest. We like to say that you should have enough time for the child to be, to have more like of definite facial traits. So the child is going to be well represented by the passport picture, and you're not going to have an issue to leave the country. Okay, Brazil is extremely, almost just like I said about the birth certificate, Brazil is going to be equally super concerned about children leaving Brazil. Historically, we had several cases of international disputes between Brazilians and U.S. citizens in which they were disputing, like the custody rights to a child, and this thing became like part of the national culture, right? So whenever you live in Brazil with a young child, it's highly concerned or highly concerning that they are not going to leave you, they are not going to let you leave the country unless they are absolutely certain that both parents are in agreement with the child leaving Brazil, which in your case would be, I would assume, easy because both parents are from the U.S. However, they also want to make sure that the baby leaving the immigration area, the customs, that the child is whoever the passport is showing, right? And if you have like a child who was born, like a couple of weeks ago, maybe the passport is not going to bring this level of certainty that the Brazilian customs would require to let you board an airplane and depart from Brazil. So ideally, you would be in Brazil for a few months, again, until the child has enough facial traits to be distinguishable by the Brazilian customs. All right, Crypto Nerd, happy to see you here. Crypto Nerd, it does have a very positive participation in our videos. Crypto Nerd does ask very good questions about our videos, and it's so good to see you here, Crypto Nerd. Hello, sir. Good to be on the stream after a long time. That's true. Can you speak about any work opportunities in Brazil in the IT sector, and how does the work visa process work? All right, so yes, IT sector in Brazil is pretty hot, and Brazil is known for having good developers. Particularly the United States hire a large number of Brazilian IT professionals in the several, I would guess, in the hundreds of thousands, okay, not like in the thousands, in the hundreds of thousands, particularly because of the currency discrepancy. It's very good for U.S. Companies to hire Brazilians, and it's good for Brazilians to work for U.S. citizens. In your case, it's different because you are probably trying to achieve an immigration legal status in Brazil, and I would say it's probably easy for you to find a sponsor in Brazil if you have desirable IT skills, Crypto Nerd. So again, the usual arrangement is like Brazilians in the U.S. working for employers in the U.S. It's not what you're asking for, but I believe because IT developers are so important, even for the Brazilian employers who are many times outsourcing the work to U.S. clients. I mean, I don't think you would have much of a difficulty to find a sponsor. And if you find a sponsor, the usual work visa is going to be the so-called temporary work visa. And the temporary work visa, and every visa is usually for a time limit. So the temporary work visa, the meaning for the temporary is that you're going to say that the work relationship is temporary, right? It doesn't make sense to say that a visa is temporary because every single visa is temporary in a sense that you have a beginning and an end. So the temporary qualification here is talking more about the labor relationship, right? If you participate in our live streams, you're gonna hear me saying, how difficult the labor relationship is in terms of extreme regulation. Employers are going to scramble to meet all the labor requirements. Employees, unfortunately, like some bad apples are going to sue a good employer, even if the employer follows every single requirement. In the book, like this bad apple, employees, they are still going to sue the employer to get one additional coin out of this employer, right? So there are so many crazy things about employment relationships in Brazil, about labor relationships, and that's the reason for the temporary work visa. The temporary basically means, listen, if you are going to sponsor a foreign citizen to work here in Brazil, the foreign citizen is going to get a visa, and the employer is going to know that the employer is not going to be entangled with the foreign citizen forever, which is kind of what happens to regular employment in Brazil. Like, you need to hire someone, and if you ever decided to fire this person, you're going to face horrible penalties, right? You're going to pay horrible penalties, and that's one of the reasons why here at the firm we say that we don't like to work with any of the visas for which the U.S. citizen would have to fund or to maintain a company. We don't work with these visas because we don't believe in them, right? But in your case, there are very good chances, Crypto Nerd, of securing a sponsored temporary work visa in Brazil, right? Like, and if you apply in Brazil, again, the technical distinction is that we would call temporary work residency, and if you're applying abroad, then yes, it's the temporary work visa, but pretty good chances, Crypto, all right? So maybe you could come to Brazil under a digital nomad and then use the digital nomad as a bridge, and once you find a good employer, you could potentially stay forever working under the so-called temporary work visa. Catherine ST, welcome, Catherine. Hi, Luciano. If you are a Brazilian citizen and a U.S. permanent resident not married with a partner that is not a Brazilian citizen or resident, can the partner claim any assets under a UNSTAV? All right, so here I'm going to understand, right, like if you're concerned about Brazil, so both partners would be living in Brazil, and one of the partners is a Brazilian citizen, the other partner is a U.S. permanent resident, right? And I would tell you, Catherine, just for the sake of making this question more encompassing, in Brazil, like there wouldn't make a difference, like if the parties are Brazilians or U.S. citizens or permanent residents or not, as long as the relationship takes place in Brazil, a Brazilian court would feel very comfortable in finding the UNSTAV, no matter the status for the partners, right? And just like I did, like at the beginning of this consultation, just to give an example that's going to make clear that it makes no difference the status. Let's assume you have two illegal immigrants in Brazil, right? Or two undocumented immigrants in Brazil, and they happen to have a relationship for a couple of years. They have a relationship that under the Brazilian court eyes would qualify as a UNSTAV. and one of the two illegal immigrants could very easily sue the other one for a distribution of assets, even though none of them would have any immigration status in Brazil. All right, Catherine, I hope that answers your question. And, I would assume your next question is going to be, all right, what would qualify as união estável? And by the way, for those who do not know, união estável means roughly like a stable union between two people. And for the U.S. and most of the world, that would mean, under a technical perspective, a common law marriage. A common law marriage is a marriage for which let's say the spouses or the parties never formally married, but they happen to be in something that's stable, and therefore the união estável or stable union. And this is considered as a common law marriage, and that exists like in Texas, in California, I would guess in pretty much, if not all of the U.S. states, I would say most of the U.S. states for sure. And in Brazil, the common law marriage, união estável, is something big. And in the past, there would be some, like requirements. All right, the partners need to live together, and they need to be together for at least a year. Nowadays, there is not such requirements anymore. And, cases for common law marriage, união estável, they're going to be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. Okay, Catherine, I hope that helps. JQuest, great information. Thanks for answering my questions. Thank you, JQuest, for participating. I hope to see you in our next live streams. Crypto Nerd, thank you, sir, for the information. Yes, digital nomad visa is a good option to enter initially. Maybe I will have to find a Brazilian girlfriend first. All right, Crypto Nerd, there you go. Catherine asked, if both partners do not live in Brazil, then união estável laws would not apply. Is that correct? Catherine, if both partners do not live in Brazil, Brazil does not have a say in your relationship, okay? Brazil is not going to have a say. However, the união estável, common law marriage, they are out there, okay? So I can talk about Texas and California, and these two states, they happen to have common law marriage rules, right? So if you're not in Brazil, but if you are in Texas or California, the common law marriage is still out there, okay? The união estável is still out there. Granted, they are not as crazy as it is in Brazil. Nowadays, in Brazil, there are couples like of a 10-month relationship being found in a união estável, people who have been, dating for a long time but never even shared a common bed, right? Not shared a common bed or a common, place of residency, right? Like people who have been dating for 5 years, but because they are dating, they decide, well, we're not going to live together. And then once, there is an end to this relationship, some judges are still going to find a common law marriage, right? So in Brazil, I think that this has got out of hand. It's kind of crazy right now in Brazil. In other countries, I would assume, like a união estável, common law marriage would be found only in more extreme circumstances. For instance, the couple is living for 5 years or 10 years together in the same home, right? Like they're sharing expenses, they have their names in bills and so on. So even though, there is common law marriage across the world, I guess the problem is really Brazil because, again, unfortunately, the decisions we see happening in Brazil, they do not make any sense at all from my perspective, all right? But if you are in Texas and California, I'm pretty sure if there is a decision for common law marriage, they would be pretty sound, as it is the case for common law jurisdictions like the U.S. All right, so we've been together for an hour. This live stream is coming to an end. I hope to see you guys next Sunday. I'm going to really push for James Weldon to join us. So it's going to be a much lighter live stream because he's going to be talking about just fun stuff like samba, places to go, Brazilian food, how to find a romantic partner. Why not? And he's going to be a blast. He's a really nice guy. I'm sure you're going to enjoy. And we also together on Wednesday, as usual. On Wednesday is going to be March the 6th. And on Wednesdays, we actually meet at 12:30 p.m. Rio de Janeiro time. I hope to see you then. And have a blessed rest of your Sunday. And see you soon.